The Trump administration has made very clear, even to the extent of renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. Military affairs is central part of what governments do. If you start looking at other things, if you start looking at like Bagram, the fact that the Trump administration is making these demands to regain the air base in Afghanistan. And the reason why is because they're like, we want to be able to have military presence towards China. I can completely see where the Trump administration is viewing the importance of Pakistan from that frame. They are an ally who gives us, if you want to use the word that we use, access. If we have a presence there, it puts us that much closer to China, puts our assets closer to China and Iran. Bringing Pakistan on board and having Pakistan move more into their orbit versus potentially moving towards Iran's orbit makes complete sense, and in many ways works in the same of what we were just talking about with the Trump administration.
Another development is the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. Just the leaders are going to be meeting at the Oval shortly. And it's not just the Pakistani Prime Minister, but it's also General Munir, who will be a part of this conversation at the Oval today. Why include a military chief in a democracy like America?
There's a lot of ways to read into it. Obviously, if I had inside knowledge to do exactly what the Trump administration is doing or Pakistan's government was doing, then I could, precisely answer this. However, I think what I could infer from it is the Trump administration has made very clear, even to the extent of renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War. They have made very clear the idea that they're very comfortable with the fact that military affairs is central part of what governments do. And so I can completely see where, especially if you start looking at other things, if you start looking at like Bagram, the fact that the Trump administration is making these demands to regain the air base in Afghanistan. And the reason why is because they're like, we want to be able to have military presence towards China. I can completely see where the Trump administration is viewing the importance of Pakistan from that frame. They are an ally who gives us, if you want to use the word that we use, access. If we have a presence there, it puts us that much closer to China, puts our assets closer to China and Iran. And indeed, recently with the attack, the Midnight Hammer that happened a few months ago, that was enabled by having this type of access, by having U.S. bases, U.S. personnel in other countries, so forth. So I think we're viewed from that framework that the Trump administration absolutely has military policy as like the forefront of foreign policy. Then it makes sense that it's like, well, why would we not have Pakistan's military officials be part of this conversation? Because that's like a central part of why we're going to be talking with them. What's interesting is that's not really a departure for the United States. Pakistan's always been critical from a security standpoint. It's just that the Trump administration is much more, hence renaming Department of Defense, Department of War. They're just much more willing to be open about it and be like, look, yeah, we want military officials here because we want them to talk to our military officials, or Trump wants to talk to them directly. So I think that for me would be what this points to.
Okay. Now, the Saudi-Pakistani defense deal is another thing that has come up in the days. What are the implications of this defense deal, especially given Saudi's intentions or Saudi's tensions with Israel, the strongest ally of America?
Yeah, this is where international politics starts to become really complicated, right? Is these conflicting or overlapping alliances. In many ways, what's notable to me, and I almost thought about writing like a piece about this, but that you are seeing a number of these countries starting, or at least considering, forming military alliances. I think Australia and Papua New Guinea was looking at this, but then China kind of stepped in to kind of try to break that up. And I think Saudi Arabia and Pakistan's agreement kind of falls into this similar camp. Now, on the one hand, an agreement, a mutual defense pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia could make a lot of sense from Saudi Arabia's standpoint. Again, because from Saudi Arabia's viewpoint, the biggest threat to the region and to their interests is Iran. Full stop. That is the biggest threat to the region. That was potentially going to be the basis for why Saudi Arabia and Israel, I think a key goal, and I still think a key goal for the Trump administration, is to have the two of them join as part of this Abraham Accords that's been signed, where various countries throughout the Middle East have been normalizing, Middle East and North Africa have been normalizing relations with Israel. And I think that that's kind of like, from Trump's standpoint, that is like the thing he most wants to achieve. And I think that was even evident in his recent tour to the region, where he's like, he wants to be able to achieve that. And the reason why that's feasible is because Saudi Arabia, one thing that Saudi Arabia and Israel agree on is Iran being a threat. That is one thing they agree on. Now, there have been some attempts to try to thaw relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran.